Recording in pro.
All right, so today we are talking about how to figure out what is contributing to your burnout because it's not just one thing. If you're thinking, if only this would change, I would feel better, then you need to listen to today's episode because we're going to work on sort of teasing out which parts of your job are a good fit, which parts are not a good fit, and what you can do about it, and like which ones are the most important. Because if I asked you right now, like, what would you change about your job? You would probably list like 5 or 10 things. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's what most people say is like, well, I would like to work fewer days. I would like more money. I would like, to work with the people I want to work with. And I don't want to see these types of patients, but I do want to see these types. And I want to start at like 9 o'clock ish and probably finish by maybe 3 or even 2:30 when the kids get out of school. So, all right, let's get started. I was thinking about this walking home the other day. I was thinking about a job that I had back when I was a new PA. So I worked in internal medicine, and the people were amazing. They were willing to train me. They were willing to hire a new graduate. So check, check right there. But what parts of that job weren't a good fit? And so I started going through all my previous jobs, and it was really eye-opening what was working for me and what wasn't. And I've been a PA for 22 years. So by now, I kind of have a good idea of what I need in a job and what's a deal breaker for me. But if you're pretty new, or if you've never really thought about this, then hopefully this episode will help. And if you know somebody who's burned out, please feel free to share it with them. All right, making sure I'm recording here. I was also thinking, I'll get back to that internal medicine job, but I was also thinking about when my mom used to take us shopping. We didn't have a mall in town. So we would go to the closest mall was 2 hours away. So we would go to like Macon or Jacksonville, Florida, and we would spend all day at the mall. And she would give us a budget, and we would have to go get our clothes, or we would get to go get our clothes. So anyway, I had this habit of buying clothes that didn't fit me because I was like, I mean, it's good enough. I like it. I mean, I remember buying this shirt, and at the time, that kind of like crochet pattern for the arms, like the shirt was solid white, and then it had this like crochet pattern arms. And I really wanted it because I could see after walking through the mall that that was trending. This was in the 90s, and they didn't have my size. I was probably a small or extra small, and they only had a large. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, good enough. And I would do that with blue jeans, like everything. And good enough. I even did it with a pair of shoes. I bought these expensive Cole Haan loafers because back then you wore loafers with no socks. And my best friend had a pair, and they didn't have my size. And this is my one trip to the mall. I either get them in a size that sort of fits, but not really, or I don't get them at all. And I got a good enough fit. And the lady who sold them to me was like, here, you can put these pads in there and it'll make them a little more snug so that hopefully they fit. And y'all, I am 46, almost 47 years old. I am done with like, oh, it's good enough. I am ready for a good fit. Like, I'm halfway done with my life, maybe. And I'm not going to settle for like, oh, it's just okay. You can make do. Like, this is sending whatever you're dealing with that's like, oh, I can just make do. Like, think about this in your life, or in your job. Not that you have to have the perfect job, but start questioning, like, why am I putting up with this? Is there anything I can do to change this situation to make it a better fit? And this is not to say you have to be all Miss Drama Queen and like, I need everything to be perfect, just the way I want it. It's about looking at your needs and seeing if you can meet those needs. And if you can't, is it a deal breaker? Are you willing to move on? Okay, so back to the internal medicine job. So it was a great group of people. They were willing to train me. I had a decent schedule. They knew I was a new graduate, so they didn't overload me. But I also didn't get invited to any of the office meetings. I don't know that they invited any of the PAs, and if they did, they didn't tell me about it. And there were like 10 doctors at the time. So they would have meetings, they would decide on these critical decisions, and I had no say so. So as a new graduate, that was not important. If you'd asked me, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to get invited to meetings and to have a say so, to feel like you have agency over what is going on in the office, the decisions that are made, the regulations, the rules, I would have said 1. I want to go home to my new husband. Now I really want to say so. I don't want things to just happen and then be told about it. So think about critical decisions. Like, is that important to you? What about training? Like, are you willing to do the hard work to sort of train yourself? Are you willing to take courses? Or would it mean the world to you if whoever hires you is willing to train you, to take you under their wing? Like mentorship, how important is that? I think that's huge, but somebody may say, oh, I'm kind of an introvert. That's not very important to me. I don't really like hanging out with somebody else. I don't want somebody to teach me. I'm a self-learner. I prefer to do things on my own. Think about the location. So I have a guy friend who's a PA, and he commutes over an hour every day to work and the same thing on the way home. That would not work for me. That would be a deal breaker. However, I said it was a deal breaker, but let me explain how it actually worked out okay. So I had a non-compete and I wanted to leave my job. But the deal was I couldn't work within a 20-mile radius of my office. So in dermatology. So I had to make the decision, either leave dermatology, move, not work for 2 years. I had all these, like, none of them were great. And I decided to get a job with another dermatology office, but I had to commute 1 hour each way. And so at first I said, no way, not going to have it. That's just a deal breaker. But here's what I want you to think about. With any decision, if you up the ante enough, if you throw in enough perks, if you throw in enough incentives, would you change your mind? So here's how I changed my mind. It was not in Atlanta traffic. It was along these country roads with beautiful churches. I commuted to a very rural, well, not very, but it was a rural area compared to where I live. And so no traffic, zero traffic. The person who hired me said, what if you could leave your house at the same time every day that you currently leave your house? You could still drop your kids off at school. What if you got home at the same time too? And I was like, how is that even possible? Like, how could you afford for me to work 2 less hours a day than I'm currently working and still make money for the practice? And so I was too focused on the how. So as you're going through these decisions, try not to focus too much on the how, because that will trip you up. There was no way I could have put this together in my head or on a spreadsheet. It took somebody else thinking outside the box to figure out how we could make it work. And I was able to cut back to 3 days a week. So if you find yourself thinking, oh no, I will never work for $80,000 a year, or I will never work in the middle of nowhere, I'll never work with one medical assistant. If they up the ante enough and sweeten the deal with enough other things, you might find yourself changing your mind. So try to release a little bit of that I will never attitude, because I am a case in point that you can be bribed and you can make it work so that it's a win-win. All right, so clientele. So your types of patients, how important is this to you? How important is it that you have maybe educated patients who are advocating for themselves and they're going to do what you ask them to do? They're going to follow up. They're going to be compliant. Like, is that important to you? Think about the types of cases you see. Are you appropriately stimulated intellectually? Are you like, yeah, this is pretty interesting? Or Are you overstimulated and over challenged and you're like, I'm in over my head. Can't do this. Like I need somebody to help me, or I should not be seeing these types of cases because it's way out of my wheelhouse. Um, would you be willing to see those types of cases if somebody trained you? Would you be willing to see nothing but boring old vanilla like skin checks all day, every day? I had this situation. So at that satellite, that's basically what I was doing. I rarely saw babies or teenagers. It was skin check after skin check after skin check. And I really liked the patients. I had excellent help. I felt like I was getting paid fairly. Um, but I was like, I don't know that I want to keep doing this long term. I'm bored. And so, how can you tweak that to make it so that you're like, actually, that's not bad? What I did, I stuck it out for 2 years, finished the non compete, and then worked there 1 day a week. And the way I sort of got it to be okay in my head, that was what I called my admin day. Even though I was seeing the same number of patients, because it was pretty easy stuff like skin checks, I would use that day to record a podcast in my van during lunch, or I would use that day to do any errands, I would even write. I'd practice when I took yoga teacher training, I would practice yoga during lunch. Like I actually looked forward to it. But if you told me I had to do that 5 days a week, I don't know that I'd be willing to. I like to mix it up a little bit. When I was interviewing for jobs and we wanted to move back to Georgia, I was working in internal medicine. And so I interviewed at this internal medicine office, and I knew within a few minutes of being in the waiting room that this was not a good fit. And I'll tell you why. They took walk-ins, and I had worked in an urgent care. I'd never worked in an ER, but I did a rotation in an ER, and I know myself. I know that I do not like unexpected things. So while I was sitting there waiting for my interview, a guy comes in bleeding from a head wound. This is internal medicine. This is not an urgent care. And they sat him right down, gave him a time slot. Yes, sir, we'll see you. We'll stitch you right up. And I thought, hell to the no. This is not for me. I don't do head wounds. And, that was a deal breaker for me. So I did the interview, and it was just as chaotic during the interview with him not really knowing how he would use me. He pointed out a broom closet and he was like, I think we'll set you up in there. And I was like, no, I don't do well with chaos. I do much better with knowing, like having a schedule. I also did a rotation at Scottish Rite when I was in PA school. This was a giant children's hospital. It was a highly desired rotation, I'm told. And I knew within the first weekend that I was on call there, not going to work. Because again, it was just unexpected things coming in. I do much better with a schedule. So think about you. Like, do you like a schedule, or do you like a little bit of excitement? Do you like some unknown? What about workload? Like, how much workload can you handle? You got to know yourself. Like, when do you reach that tipping point where you're like, I'm going to kill somebody? Not really. But when you're like, I cannot do this. I reached my tipping point with workload when we had 2 providers. God bless them. Love both of them. But they both got pregnant around the same time, and they were both out on maternity leave. And we didn't have as many providers then. So our numbers crept up. And I mean, I reached my tipping point, and that was really my second episode of burnout. And I knew that if something didn't change, I couldn't keep doing that. And I asked myself questions like, well, if they paid me, 20% more, would I keep doing this? And the answer was no. No amount of money would let me do that. I had reached this critical point where I was going to get sloppy. I was going to like mess up and hurt somebody, or make a mistake medically. So you have to know your workload. Like, what are you willing to do? When you're thinking about all the different components, I like to think about what would it take? What would it take to make me want to do this? So when I went through life coaching, Martha Beck, she's an author and a life coach, she gave the example of a men's bathroom at a stadium. So you are offered like $25 to clean this bathroom, and has so many urinals, and all these drunk people have been using this men's bathroom, and you get offered $25 to clean it, and you have to really clean it, like with the, down on your hands and knees. And everybody said, no, not doing that. And then she kept upping the ante. Would you do it for $500? Would you do it for $1,000? And sure enough, she got to a point where everybody in the whole group said, yes, I will do it. Now, we all reached that point at different marks. For some people, they said, oh, $1,000? Yes, I would clean a bathroom for that. For other people, it's, I was talking to my group I'm coaching today, and I said, like, okay, would you do it if they hired another PA for your office and they told you only had to work 3 days a week? So you get the point. It's not just like money for everybody, but it's like finding that sweet spot of what would it take to make me do this. With your burnout, maybe there is a person or people that you are thinking, if they just got fired, I would like my job again. This may or may not be true. It's usually not one factor, though. And how you do anything is how you do everything. So we have patterns in our lives, and these patterns show up over and over, relationship after relationship, whether it's work or romantic relationship or parenting, whatever it is. If there is a person who is causing you a lot of friction, a lot of unhappiness, ask yourself what it is about that person that it's bringing out in you. So a lot of times it's something in ourselves that we wish we could change. And for me, I worked with a physician, and I 100% blamed my burnout on this person. And, in hindsight, this person was overstepping boundaries and doing things that I didn't really think were right. And I was not standing up for what I believed in. I was also not standing up for my boundaries. So in other words, this person was showing me areas where I really needed to grow and stretch. And so it took years to see that, and you probably won't see it in the moment, but just keep that in mind, that it's not just like one person. If they weren't in your life would be perfect, because that person is showing you something about yourself. Autonomy. Let's talk about autonomy. How much autonomy do you want? Do you want to be in the middle of nowhere working all by yourself in a rural emergency department? Or do you really like a team and you want to work with other providers? How important is that to you? What about control over your schedule? Do you want to be told you are seeing this many patients, and then you just come into work, you do what you're told, and then you leave? Or do you really like control and you want to be able to block your schedule? Somebody invites you to go on vacation, or you get a doctor's appointment and you really need to block your schedule. How important is that control? What about, let's see. Yeah, sufficient rewards. That's another one. So like, how are you rewarded? Do rewards matter to you? Like, do you just want words of affirmation? Like, you are doing an amazing job. Does that light you up? Or is it money? Or is it service? Like, do you love when your medical assistants like have the room all ready and they're like, here you go? Or is it when patients really build you up and they tell you thank you and they bring you muffins like a patient did with me this week? So think about what floats your boat, and how are you getting that at your current office or hospital? I've talked about strength finders, and another test. I've done so many of these online tests. But Strength Finders was very eye-opening because learning was one of my top strengths. And if you've been in a job for so many years, you may feel like you're not learning anymore. So, what can you do? It may even be outside of that job, but what can you do to help you meet that need instead of just relying on your office or hospital to like help you figure out what you can learn? Um, Okay, I have talked long enough, but I just want you to think about all the different pieces that go into this and also how to gauge how important it is and what you can do to sort of slide that number up or down. Like if it's a 10 out of 10 and it's so important and you're going to leave your job over it, what if another part of the job changed and you're like, ooh, actually, like with me and my commute. Oh, I want to keep talking, but I've got a therapy. I've got a therapy phone call. And so I better get off so I don't incur a late fee. I will catch you guys next week. But remember, there is always hope.